He said, quote, "Our goal in short is a humane alternative to genocide, the removal of undesirable elements from society, but without any of the moral stigma. A virtualized human is in permanent solitary confinement. The cell contains an immersive virtual reality interface that allows him to experience a rich, fulfilling life in a completely imaginary world." In 2019, specifically, they really started selling themselves as preventing mass shootings before they happened. Carbine 911 was financed heavily by Jeffrey Epstein. Now they've slowly taken over the 911 call systems of a litany of counties across the United States. Palantir was specifically really created to be a pre-crime entity. When people like that say they're not spying on Americans, it's kind of hard to trust them. Keir Starmer is pushing through digital ID to stop illegal immigration. But it seems like in the US, they're actually, instead of sneaking it through border stuff, it's going to slide in with the Genius Act. The definition of how the government defines domestic terrorism, it includes people really on both sides of the divide, people that are against perceived government overreach, for example. They use whichever group is convenient to pander to their base, to justify us giving up liberty for perceived security.
A few of the platforms left where people can kind of have a somewhat of a public square, they're actually a centralized choke point. They're actually picking and choosing companies that have a less chance of being independent.
The so-called libertarian elites behind people like J.D. Vance are very overtly transhumanist and think that the only way forward is to basically merge with machines. They are playing us against ourselves, and some of them play the role of we're elites on this side and we're elites on the other side to help engineer the divide and conquer necessary to herd us into this cattle pen.
Guys, it's been 10 and a half months since we last caught up.
That's a long time.
Jeez.
A lot of time we recorded, I believe, November 10th, 2025, which was 2 days after the election. We talked about Palantir Mafia coming in, and when I was thinking about how to start this conversation, I'm sure you guys saw it, but Alex Karp at the All In Summit very confidently letting the people of the United States know that Palantir is not spying on individual Americans. At first I was like, oh man, maybe I've really misunderstood Palantir. And then I was like, wait a second, like how is that possible?
Yeah, do you remember when like James Clapper lied about how they were spying on Americans under oath and didn't get in trouble for it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think when people like that say they're not spying on Americans, it's kind of hard to trust them given a lot of the precedents, you know?
Yeah.
You know, James Clapper, NSA. The NSA is not going to work with Palantir, though. They can't get the contracts because they don't spy enough. That's what was told.
Well,
I'm pretty sure they contract for all 18 U.S. intelligence agencies.
Yeah. Well,
yeah.
I guess a year into the Trump admin, the last episode we did was like what to expect the next 4 years. And I think the crux of that conversation revolved around sort of financial stablecoin implementation. I think it's pretty clear that that was a very strong priority of this administration. They passed the Genius Act rather quickly. Obviously, we're talking about the PayPal, Palantir Mafia getting more ingrained in the surveillance state here. That seems to be happening. And I think one thing we highlighted was with the immigration policy, watch out for the border. Digital IDs are probably the borders where they're going to basically Trojan horse digital IDs in. And so, yeah,
I mean, that's still possible. I think that's definitely what's happening in the UK, though. So Keir Starmer is pushing through digital ID to stop illegal immigration, which, previously the Labour Party in the UK was pushing it. We're going to stop hate speech and stop online bullying. But it seems like in the US, they're actually, instead of sneaking it through border stuff and on those same, justifications that the UK government is using, it looks like it's going to slide in with the Genius Act, considering what some of the stuff they've put out asking for comment on after its passage, sort of framing digital ID as an essential pillar to the implementation of the Genius Act. So
somebody who prides himself on being on the cutting edge of all this, I was unaware that digital ID was tied into this. I assume some KYC AML stuff, but didn't realize.
Yeah, it's not directly, like, there's nothing in the Genius Act specifically talking about digital ID. There's obviously a lot about know your customer and Bank Secrecy Act stuff and what have you. But I think the bigger, so as it relates to the Genius Act specifically, the Treasury did open up, asking for comments, and within that, proposition asking for public comment. They did bring up digital ID, and I think people like Lola Leitz at The Rage has been covering a lot of the Genius Act implications for basically using articles of the Patriot Act to push towards a lot of the stuff, which is obviously not good. But I think what's actually kind of interesting is not so much about the US yet, although I think it's pretty inevitable that will come at some point. But we're actually seeing the downstream effects of the stablecoin legislation passing in the US, other places in the world now. Like in the UK, they're limiting how many dollar stablecoins, or attempting to limit how many dollar stablecoins a UK citizen can hold. And then we're seeing, mass debanking in Vietnam. I think it was something like 70 something million bank accounts were closed, basically saying, we'll rebank you if you agree to this biometric stuff and, basically implement a digital ID. And I think the reason for that is, when there's a proliferation of US dollar stable coins across the world, and, now there's even avenues for yield to be given to those stable coins, which we're going to see, right, at some point. Why would any foreign national hold anything other than, dollars, hopefully, Bitcoin, if you're into that. But why would you hold a local currency when you can hold dollars, get yield from it, and all you need to do to get to it is have, a smartphone? So I think countries around the world, the euro, the ECB is now putting out comments being like, we're screwed if we let the dollar stable coins take over, because why would you want to stay in the euro when you can get dollars with yield? So we're going to actually see, I think, the rest of the world first implement a lot of restrictions on people via digital ID and, choking these on-ramps to stable coins, because people are going to massively, flight, just incredible capital flight from their local currencies, and they want to keep that money in their country. Otherwise, they're fucked. They don't want you putting their money in US debt or, in tethers. They want to keep you in your local currency. So we're already starting to see the downstream effects internationally from the Genius Act as it relates to, let's prevent capital flight, because if all the money leaves the country, we're kind of screwed. So it remains to be seen how they'll do it in the US, what carrot they'll dangle, whether it's some UBI or some, yield thing or something that gets American citizens to comply with this stuff. But we're already starting to see it as a defensive maneuver from foreign nations to prevent capital flight via stable coins. Just kind of crazy.
Yeah, the Vietnam story, I wrote about it last week. It's pretty astonishing. I believe it was 84 million bank accounts were closed, and it's typical government, and maybe it makes sense to a certain extent, but I think it's certainly an overreach. They were like, hey, there's a bunch of people spinning up drop shipping businesses here, and they're sort of laundering money from other countries in Southeast Asia and fraudulently spinning up these bank accounts. And I think the population of Vietnam is less than 100 million. So obviously there's multiple bank accounts, but something that we've been talking about for quite some time is this push towards biometric verification. And that was sort of what they Trojan horsed in. It's like, hey, we need to stop this fraud.
Right.
We need to stop this money laundering. So we need a face scan or a fingerprint if you want to have an account.
Yep.
Yeah, well, I think the pace of that globally, of pushing that through globally, is really picked up. Especially, the EU announced last year that they were going to have this year basically be where they roll it all through for foreign travelers coming into the EU. I think the State Department just issued something being like, Americans, prepare to scan your face when you go to Europe. So, they pretty much done that. But this was an agreed upon thing with Interpol. That to move that way, and the U.S. was agreed to do that. So it just is a matter of time, really, until they implement it, unless there's some directive from the administration distancing themselves from that Interpol policy. But I haven't seen anything of that at this point. So, and already, I haven't traveled to the U.S. since 2023, but even then, it was kind of face scanning, and they wanted you to, do an even more intense biometric thing if you wanted to skip the line with that private company.
Clear.
Yeah, those guys. And then there's the TSA itself has sort of like that fast lane they offer if you like pre-check, and apparently they're going to put the deeper scan in with pre-check at some point, and
Yeah, one of the last times I was flying, I was like, I had like an hour. I don't like to get to airports early, because fuck that. And I had like an hour to get to my flight, and it was an international flight. And, this lady ran up and was like, "You're going to miss your flight. You're going to miss it. The security line is too long. Come with me and I'll sign you up for the clear thing and we'll do the thing and you'll make your flight. Like, you can't miss your flight, And I was like, I'd rather miss my flight than go do that shit. And then I made it with like 45 minutes. Like, it wasn't even close, but like, that
trying to sigh out.
That like immediate, like, we're going to miss like a big thing.
You're doomed. Scan your face.
Yeah. I was like,
and you won't be doomed.
No, I'll take the doom. It's fine. I'll catch a later flight.
It is funny watching how easily conditioned people are, because even still in the United States, I fly quite frequently within the States, and I don't have pre-check. People think I'm crazy for that. I'm like, I just don't have it. And you go through the regular line, and they have the face scanners pretty much nowadays at every sort of TSA checkpoint for regular boarding lines. And most people don't read the sign right before it that says you can opt out of this. And I can say with confidence, in the last 20 times I've flown over the last 2 years, I'm the only one that I've observed that is saying, I'm going to opt out of this. And like, you don't have to scan your face. And even if it doesn't matter, there's cameras all throughout the airport.
Sure,
and
of course.
They're definitely scanning your face.
Sure.
No matter what, it's like, I want to send a message. Like, I do not like this at all. I'm going to consciously opt out of it.
Yeah, you can't comply to this stuff. Like, I like totally, and I say this, people always shit on me talking shit on stablecoins, and it's like I empathize and sympathize with people that want to use them. I totally get it, and I understand that, but I think, like, we have such few lines in the sand to draw anymore, and it's like we need to not comply as much as possible. That not in a way that I'm not suggesting anybody really fuck their lives up or their kids' lives or whatever. Obviously, it's a personal decision, but like, yeah, I think if we normalize pushing back these things, because it becomes super normalized that we get our whole body scanned, and it's just like we really shouldn't have to do that. And digital ID really won't work unless everybody complies. And unfortunately, they're going to try to figure out some way to manufacture consent for the compliance, and they're damn good at that, unfortunately.
Well, that's just what I was going to get to. Like, we are in an environment where it seems like manufactured consent is being drummed up with speech laws, not only in the UK, but they're coming here in the United States. The newsletter I wrote last night, I'm not sure if you've seen, I believe it's SB 277 out of California that just passed the Senate. They're basically going to bring hate speech laws, and they're focusing on the social media platforms with more than $100 million in gross revenue annually first. But it's basically the state of California saying, if you say something that we deem is hate speech, we will fine the social media platforms. And that's just a sort of light nudging towards forcing the social media platforms to curb speech. So we're seeing that. Obviously, with the aftermath of Charlie Kirk, things are very divisive right now. The right is certainly ginned up. The left is ginned up as well. And I've made a conscious effort 2 weeks out. The first few days, I definitely was reacting to it a little emotional. But now, after some conversations with people and looking at how the story has sort of developed since then, with the narrative that the government's putting out there, what's happening, I'm like, there's something here. It seems like there's some attempt to divide and conquer here. So I'm trying to step back from the culture wars and just focus on Bitcoin and privacy right now.
Yeah, definitely good for you. Well, a lot of these, big events, and a lot of times they capitalize on real tragedies, but the national security state takes advantage of these types of things pretty consistently to put for greater control, right? And so, you brought up hate speech laws in California, presumably coming from the left. There's been a lot of questionable rhetoric from the right after the Kirk assassination, talking about hate speech as well. And so ultimately, where does that take us? To a place where there's a lot more censorship than people would want. Censorship was a big political issue last election cycle, really big for certain, demographics. And so to have sort of the idea that hate speech is going to be potentially embraced by both sides, I definitely don't see that as a good thing. And also, some of the stuff that has come out in the aftermath of this assassination has been this, what I would call a renewed push to upstart the war on domestic terror, which people have to keep in mind. There's a long history to that. And so a lot of times when people get really emotionally sucked in to things, they kind of are focusing very much on like the present and in the recent. Whereas, the domestic terror infrastructure is something that's been steadily developed by every administration ever since 9/11. Because remember, in the post 9/11 environment, that's how we got the Department of Homeland Security. And right before 9/11, they introduced legislation to basically make DHS, but under a different name. And there wasn't a lot of support for it until conveniently after 9/11, when a lot of legislation that was liberty curbing was pushed through, the Patriot Act being the most well-known, but also the creation of DHS and numerous other laws. And ultimately, a lot of the war on terror infrastructure was always meant to be used domestically at some point, which is why you have a lot of those same things launching, at the same time in the early 2000s. And so, every administration since then, from Bush to Obama, and then Trump the first time around, and Biden, they have all expanded the domestic terror infrastructure and apparatus. And if you actually look at the definition of how the government defines domestic terrorism, which is actually put out by the Biden administration, but it's been supported. I haven't seen them change, to the best of my knowledge, the definition since Trump came in. But it includes people really on both sides of the divide, people that are against perceived government overreach, for example, can be defined as domestic terrorists. And then people who are against all forms of capitalism, for example, and that was Biden that put that out. But that could include potentially you're against stakeholder capitalism of the World Economic Forum, for example. And some of the, and it's a pretty wide-reaching thing, unfortunately. And, governments tend to use kind of these vague definitions and use them to their advantage whenever they want, right? So they give themselves a lot of wiggle room so they can label whoever they want a domestic terrorist. And so, Antifa has now been labeled a domestic terror organization, and I would look at them as something, sort of like most likely very Fed infiltrated, in the same way that like Patriot Front and like even the Proud Boys had feds or like informants like at the very top of the structure and things like that. They tend to, this is how the national security state operates when it wants to justify bigger budgets, more control, and a removal of our liberties. And this has been going on since the 1980s with Operation Gladio. When they developed the strategy of tension, they were the CIA and intelligence agencies basically were funding terrorism against civilians in Europe, and then they were blamed on left-leaning groups, and they specifically were going after civilians. And it was a CIA plan, really, to prevent regimes that they deemed as aligned with the Soviets potentially, but not even actually. Just like left-leaning parties, they wanted to push Europe politically in a particular direction or towards particular candidates. They, were financing terrorism, and they were doing that with like the mob in the Vatican. I mean, it was it's a documented thing. So, call me a conspiracy person all you want, which of course people like to do. But it's something that, intelligence agencies have been doing. And so that, if they want to institute draconian control measures, digital control measures, over the United States or Western society or global society at large, they're probably, they tend to fall back on these same patterns and tactics that they've used time and again, decade over decade. And so what I worry about is a push for that happening again, flipping sides, right? So you could argue that Biden tried to do it to an extent, but I think really it's whatever party's in power, they push for continued expansion of this apparatus. And they use it, they use whichever group is convenient to pander to their base, to justify us giving up liberty for perceived security, right? Mm-hmm. Which is also part of the Operation Gladio strategy of tension. I mean, that's exactly what the goal of it was to get people to give up their liberties to feel safer from these terror acts that they were that were being financed by intelligence and the mob.
Sup, freaks? This was brought to you by our good friends at Obscura. If you've been listening to the show long enough, you know we care deeply about privacy, particularly as you peruse the web. It is important to be using a VPN, and Obscura is our VPN of choice. That is because it is a VPN built by a Bitcoiner for Bitcoiners. It is the first VPN that can't log your activity and outsmarts internet censorship. Obscura VPN works even in the most restrictive Wi-Fi networks where other VPNs simply fail to connect. With server locations across America and the globe, Obscura keeps your internet access unrestricted wherever you are. I've been using it since it launched. I see no problems with speed. I can get on YouTube TV without any problems. It simply works. They can't log. You can pay in Bitcoin. Go to obscura.net. Use the code TFTC25 for 25% off an annual subscription. It's already a good deal, their annual deal. The TFTC25 code gets you 25% more off. Go check it out. Obscura.net. Use the code TFTC25.
Sup, freaks? This rip of TFTC was brought to you by our good friends at Bitkey. Bitkey makes Bitcoin easy to use and hard to lose. It is a hardware wallet that natively embeds into a 2 or 3 multi-sig. You have one key on the hardware wallet, one key on your mobile device, and Block stores a key in the cloud for you. This is an incredible hardware device for your friends and family, or maybe yourself, who have Bitcoin on exchanges and have for a long time, but haven't taken the step to self-custody because they're worried about the complications of setting up a private public key pair, securing that seed phrase, setting up a PIN, setting up a passphrase. Again, Bitkey makes it easy to use, hard to lose. It's the easiest 0 to 1 step, your first step to self-custody. If you have friends and family on the exchanges who haven't moved it off, tell them to pick up a Bitkey. Go to bitkey.world, use the key TFTC20 at checkout for 20% off your order. That's bitkey.world, code TFTC20.
We've been, over the last month and a half, inundated. I think people have already forgotten about the church shooting in Minneapolis, the Irana stabbing in North Carolina, and obviously Charlie Kirk this morning. I'm not sure if you guys saw, but somebody with a sniper shot people at the Dallas ICE facility. So it seems like this accelerating political violence is definitely going to be used as a frame to push and take civil liberties. And I think one thing that people forgot, Mark, I think I saw you comment on a tweet I put out about this, but right after the Minneapolis shooting, you had some ex-IDF guy on Fox Business News saying that he was ready to deploy Gideon, his AI pre-crime surveillance tech.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's already a Mossad CIA. I would argue it's a front. It's a company called Gabriel that sells like preventative tech to schools and churches to prevent shootings before they happen. If you're interested in reading about them, you can search for Gabriel on Unlimited Hangout. But there's been efforts to sort of build up, position particular companies for this, what I would call pre-crime infrastructure. And they, in 2019 specifically, they really started selling themselves as preventing mass shootings before they happen. One of these companies was Carbine 911, now known as Carbine, which people may remember was financed heavily by Jeffrey Epstein and Leslie Wexner, and Ehud Barak used to be the chairman, and a lot of, Israeli intelligence people, including like the commander of Unit 8200 were on the board. An Epstein associate named Nicole Junkerman was on the board. And then the Epstein Association came out and they tried to distance themselves, yada, yada, yada. But they were selling themselves to take over 911 call systems throughout the U.S. and basically sold themselves in 2019 that we can stop mass shootings before they happen, or increase response time and all of these things. And now they've slowly taken over the 911 call systems of a litany of counties across the United States. But after the Epstein stuff came out, they tried to rebrand as more American. So they only left one, ex-Israeli intelligence guy that co-founded it, there, and they put like Michael Chertoff on the board of advisors, who was former DHS, and they put one of Trump's previous heads of DHS, Christian Nielsen, I think her name was, and then an ex-FBI guy or something, to try and, I guess, make it look more American, but it's really the same type of program. And also Peter Thiel was a big investor in that, and now recently published emails from Epstein World that have come out in the first half of this year's show. Ehud Barak and Epstein talking about meeting with Peter Thiel specifically about Carbine. And, that's relevant because of, Thiel and Palantir, Palantir being specifically pre-crime focused. And what's important too is, back at the end of 2019, when all of this was going on, Trump was in office the first time, and all of these, mass shootings were happening and there was an outcry about it, like the El Paso Walmart shooting, for example, and a few other things that took place in a relatively short period of time. And what's interesting about that is before those shootings happened, not long before, William Barr, who was Attorney General, gave this speech where he basically was like, we need to remove encryption. We have to have a federal backdoor into everything encrypted, all encrypted software. And we'll eventually get that because what he called a galvanizing event would soon happen that would help reduce Americans' resistance to that policy, right? And then all of these shootings happen. And then not long after that, William Barr makes pre-crime an official policy of the Department of Justice. So he set up the infrastructure to legalize pre-crime at that time in October 2019. And so it's been being built on ever since, but they haven't really necessarily deployed it massively, right? But they've set up the legal infrastructure to legalize it. And they created a program under which the DOJ has made a few arrests that's called DEEP. It's an acronym. I forget exactly what it stands for, but they've made a few arrests where they've arrested people preemptively for social media posts. Right. And then in that same period of time, also, Trump came out and his touted response to these mass shootings was to have social media sites deploy some sort of software program that would detect shooters before they can act. Right. So continuing to build on this pre-crime thing. And at the time, he was being pitched, and the biggest lobbyist in the administration for it was Jared Kushner and Ivanka Trump, to create this new agency, a health DARPA or a HARPA, they called it. And the first program of it, the pilot program of it was called Safe Homes, which is, again, another very long acronym for something that I don't remember. Sorry. But basically, the idea of it was to have AI scour American social media posts in mass, and then use an algorithm to determine which posts show users exhibiting early neuropsychiatric warning signs, and that if they were, flagged, they could be triaged to a variety of solutions, like court-ordered physicians, or psychiatrists, right? Or like potentially house arrest, just for having social media posts that the AI has determined is bad. It's very messed up. So, ultimately they didn't make HARPA, but Biden made HARPA. It's called ARPA-H. And the same architects of the HARPA that was being pitched under Trump ended up being the same architects of Biden's ARPA-H, but ARPA-H was sold as a cancer moonshot. We're going to cure cancer with ARPA-H. But I mean, ARPA-H is absolutely still around and still has these kinds of this kind of focus in addition to its health focus, right? So, unfortunately, the Trump administration, or at least Trump as a president, has that precedent from his previous administration of responding to concerns about guns by being like, we should apply pre-crime to American social media posts and determine who might be a bad actor before they commit any crime. And from the civil liberty perspective, this is terrible. Mm-hmm. And an even greater warning sign is the increasing involvement, which you brought up earlier, Marty, of Palantir in this administration, because Palantir was specifically really created to be a pre-crime entity. It is a successor to this post 9/11 program that was housed in DARPA, Total Information Awareness, and it's been Palantir since then has been piloting predictive policing throughout the country. I think they first started doing that in the 2014-2015 window, they because of their connections with all of, pretty much every U.S. intelligence agency and how much data they cover up and hold on every American, having Palantir, be involved in the government so extensively. And also now in like your taxes, like their recent partnership with like the IRS and, with mortgages and like increasingly getting involved with finances and also, running a lot of major Wall Street banks. It could potentially get very, very complicated. And so we're sort of at this stage where a lot of this infrastructure is starting to come together. And in order to get people to relinquish civil liberties enough to have this kind of predictive policing infrastructure be the norm, something really big has to happen. People have to get really angry. And more importantly, people have to get really insecure and fearful. Right. Yeah. And so, I worry that this is sort of an important moment, an inflection point where they're going to try and start pushing us in that direction.
A turning point.
Well, I was going to say that, but I didn't want to. But I mean, Trump and Elon Musk and some of these other people explicitly made that, signaling in their statements around the Charlie Kirk Memorial, for example, that this is a turning point and all of that. But we don't want it to be a turning point where it leads us to a dark end point, right?
Well, it's interesting, right? One of the first reactions to the brutal assassination was, the putting pressure on Discord, on Steam,
on Signal,
on I think even Twitter. I think a bunch of the CEOs for these companies are going to be called to sort of testify about what they can do to sort of prevent things like this. And a lot of the public discourse about the shooting has been about the grooming that takes place on platforms like Discord and how can the feds come in and clean it up with predictive policing, with AI algorithms, with some sort of AI moderation, as if feds have never groomed a mass shooter before or anything like that. But let's not get you demonetized. But it's whenever obviously it's a difficult thing to talk about because we're so close to it. No one really has any idea what's going on. We're all being fed information from sources we generally don't trust anyway. So I don't necessarily trust the FBI right now, not to get put on the list. But, I don't know. I have no idea what happened. It's fucked up. It's sad. But the reaction is something I can absolutely, in the discourse, is absolutely something I can comment on. And immediately it went to, these apps, these communication platforms, which are very important for us to be able to organize under, and it's dangerous. I think it's very scary to me that, a few of the platforms left where people can kind of have a somewhat of a public square, they're actually a centralized choke point, just like that California bill you brought up. It's like, they're not attacking the people writing the stuff on Twitter or YouTube. They're attacking the centralized platformers, and they can put pressure on them. I'm going to fine you $100 million if someone says, something. They're not going to let that happen because it will hurt their bottom line. And so the incentive is very easy to push on these private companies. Again, they're private companies. They're not necessarily constitutionally protected. And so I think, unfortunately, the reaction that we're going to see from a lot of this, and I've already started to see it, is, a further, erosion of the little public square we have left, which is not a lot. And you mentioned it earlier, like the left is ginned up, the right is ginned up, and like they fucking should be. Everybody should be ginned up right now. But unfortunately, it seems like we're ginned up at each other. And
well, that's the goal, right?
Yeah.
I would argue, who are some domestic terrorists that should be gone after? I don't know. What about Dick Cheney? What about Leslie Wexner, who funded Jeffrey? Why can't we investigate them with all of the resources of DHS and, the Palantir and the NSA and whatever? Like, why can't we go after people like that, But instead it's going to be pointed at regular people. And what I am concerned about too, specifically with like the Antifa branding, is that they'll try and conflate anyone who criticizes fascism in general as being somehow affiliated with Antifa. And there was a Zero Hedge story that I read talking about the Antifa labeling that basically was conflating like people who are anti-fascist but not necessarily associated with the group Antifa as being part of it. And that's complicated because maybe you're someone like me and you don't like fascism or communism.
Right.
Fancy
that.
And do we, if there's an issue where it becomes very apparent or a policy is being put forth that would very much, bring to fruition the Mussolini style of fascism, of corporatism, a fusion of corporation and state, and you want to criticize that, well, you get labeled as
anti-fascist,
as part of these organizations. And people might think that's kind of far off, but I mean, think about how the original war of terror went, right? Where regular people in the US that happened to be Muslim were targeted, and even though they had nothing to do with Al-Qaeda. Right.
Well,
and now you have the former head of Al-Qaeda being given a diplomatic welcome in New York. Like,
Well,
David Petraeus is like, how you holding up?
Yeah.
Well,
former head of Al-Qaeda.
Look, this is insane to me. I had this teed up to share because I think it highlights one thing, like the
9/11 was an inside job, most definitely.
Whoa.
Yeah.
So sorry, Marty.
You know how I think. Yeah. I mean, I think the 9/11 narrative that we've been fed is completely wrong. What happened to Building 7? Nobody wants to talk about Building 7.
Well, I mean, Americans were told we have to give up all of our freedoms because we have to destroy the people who did this. This is one of the guys that did that.
Yeah. And that's the point. That's why I want to pull it up, is like their narrative when it's convenient to push through the Patriot Act and all these civil liberties infringing directives from the government. They'll run with the narrative, but here we are 24 years later. Nobody really cares about Al-Qaeda anymore. It's like, hey, Al-Qaeda,
yeah, well, that guy, Al-Jilani, who's in charge of Syria now, the U.S. helped put him there. It was Obama and Hillary in the Obama administration. It's been aided by every administration since then until Assad was overthrown. And they're literal terrorists. And here we are. Now he's in a suit, so it's fine. Yeah. And now he's shaking hands with another terrorist named General David Petraeus that used to be head of the CIA.
Yeah, I mean,
that's hate speech. I better be careful.
It's almost so far in your face, too. And like building on, it's almost like, all right, command and control. We had the Al-Qaeda war against terrorism narrative for 20 years, forever war. That sort of pittered out. It's like, okay, now we're going to pivot to this domestic terrorism framing to try and divide people and bringing even more surveillance technology to the country. And oh, by the way, as soon as we start doing that, we're going to basically tie a knot in the Al-Qaeda thing. We're friends now. And it's completely weird. And
can you imagine having lost a family member in 9/11 or having cancer because you were a first responder to 9/11 and watching this happen?
In New York, too. Like, right? It was at the UN, right?
Yeah, and like they wouldn't let anyone from Palestine come represent Palestine. And no, not Hamas, like the PA, or like someone... Any Palestinian diplomat, including the ones that have no affiliation with Hamas at all, they were all blocked from coming to represent Palestine. But yeah, let's let the Al-Qaeda guy come in. That's fine.
It's very weird. And that's what I think.
Well, I mean, it just means they're full of shit.
Yeah. Well, and that's what I wanted to bring up. I mean, obviously, years ago, we were talking about Agenda 2030 as put forth by the World Economic Forum. But and I think there's a lot of people that are under the impression like, okay, we avoided that. We're not doing the Great Reset. But I think it's just being rebranded.
Yeah. Well, Fink's in charge.
We said
now,
that
right?
when we came on, I don't know, 2023 or I guess early 2024, maybe. Yeah.
Yeah. We wrote this piece called Tokenized Inc. and we kind of phrased it as like, we called it phase shift dialectics. And it's like all of a sudden, malaise at Davos and like everybody's cheering.
Yeah, they were like, Malay obliterated Davos, and the Davos elites that were interviewed were like, we loved it. Spank us harder, Daddy Malay. I mean, that doesn't make any sense if that. Okay.
Right.
It doesn't happen that quickly. The switch doesn't go like that. Also, by the way, he did not get rid of the central bank, and now we're going to bail them out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. A lot of issues there. But yeah, I mean, like Fink, he's like Mr. ESG basically, and then he pivots, becomes a Bitcoin maxi, and starts leaning into a lot of this, kind of like freedom rhetoric or whatever.
Now he's running the WEF.
Now he's running the WEF, and I was thinking we watched this really interesting Corbett report documentary about BlackRock and talking about Aladdin, which was the this computer system built by an Israeli with the BlackRock guys that basically is like the risk management tool system for like the whole financial system. It's pretty incredible. It's brought up in Adam Curtis's hypernormalization. Aladdin is a very interesting, data farm, and I believe in Seattle, in the Washington area. And, it's really interesting. It connected a dot for me that I had never really connected before. about how, why are they pushing these ESG things? And the way that I kind of understood it in the context of this was, because Aladdin is actually this financial instrument that helps put, does risk analysis for all of these big index funds and all these big traders and VC firms that are, sloshing around, the biggest, most liquid market in the world in the US dollar, like derivatives and futures and funds indexes. And, ESG is actually really this way. If they create an ESG score, this like social credit system, and they say, if you're using too much of your own power, or you have this infrastructure that is really bad for the environment, but you're actually like an independent, company that can kind of survive on its own because you have the infrastructure you need to survive. You're not dependent on, maybe less, resilient, green energy or whatever. They can actually literally pick and choose which companies survive via this, algorithmic financial market. And they can say, if you don't have a high enough ESG score, then we're not going to put you in these indexes. We're not going to tell people to buy your funds, and you get a low score in Aladdin, which runs fucking everything. And so in reality, they're actually picking and choosing companies that have a less chance of being independent and pushing back from, whatever sort of totalitarianism market, WEF agenda structure stuff that we're starting to see be implemented under a right rhetoric. So these companies that are actually able to get through, have a high enough ESG score, play by Daddy Fink's rules, they're actually going to be a lot less independent. So they are able to financialize companies that don't have as much independence and therefore can't really push back against the state, which has, kind of gone into these, private wells everywhere. And Aladdin is just like this humongous thing that no one ever talks about. And it has such huge effects for like how they're going to implement this stuff. And I think it's really not that surprising, unfortunately, that, Fink is now, co-chair of the forum. And he's also the guy who has more control over anybody else via his firm and via this analytics, empire to pick and choose winners of the future economy. So it's like they're using the guise of, free market, libertarianism to actually enact and actualize all of the ESG shit, all the WEF stuff, all the shit that is really scary, that we end up having these sort of companies that are reliant on, state power companies and state data centers and all this stuff, and they really don't have any ability to push back. Then those companies are the ones that get choke pointed by free speech. They're the ones that are running YouTube, Facebook, all these companies that choose to, they want to be winners. So they play ball, and now they have no grounds to stand, when things get crunched down. And we're seeing that now the crunch is really happening from the state, and there's a slow erosion of civil liberties via financial incentives. And, that's something that, Bitcoiners and freedom-based people have talked about for so long. This erosion of constitutional rights will be done through financial incentives. Well, how do they actually do it? Now they have all these mechanisms to really pick and choose and make sure only companies that have no chance of pushing back are the ones that get, all the money, and the ones that get all the resources from a financialization standpoint. And nowadays, it's all about financialization. I mean, there's really like companies nowadays, it doesn't even fucking matter how much money you make. It's like what your stock price is, and if you're included in the S&P 500 or not, if you're in such and such index fund or not, if the traders like you, if there's a meme, if some influencer is shilling your stock. I mean, we've gone into such this. We financialize finance in such a ludicrous way that now it's really all algorithmic driven. And who controls the algorithms? There's not that many people. It's a really small group of people. It's the Finks, it's the Carps, it's the Teals. And now they're all sitting on top of the biggest think tanks and basically in the White House. So, now we're kind of going to see the fruits of that work. And hopefully we don't. I think I started this rant talking about left and right being jimmied up against each other and not against the guys shaking the jar. And it's like, we know what they're going to do. We know what they've built. They've told us their policies that they want to implement. It was just Klaus Schwab in his fucking robe, and he told us what he wanted to do. and we just sort of forgot because we just assumed he's gone now. But it's like, no, they're going to implement all these things. It's going to be digital ID. It's going to be carbon credit scores.
Yeah.
It's going to be erosion of free speech. And now they can actually do it. They are doing it. And they're going to keep using legitimate crises or manufactured ones to keep slowly eroding the shore we have.
And it's also a big part of the WEF's push, right, was the Fourth Industrial Revolution, which is this push into transhumanism. And the so-called libertarian elites behind people like J.D. Vance and that have been really involved with the Trump administration this cycle are very overtly transhumanist and think that the only way forward is to basically merge with machines, which, you know, in practice is not really that different. And, you know, I really wish that more people that actually cared about liberty and civil liberties and freedom and individual sovereignty would actually pay attention to the political philosophies of people like Peter Thiel and Curtis Yarvin, Nick Land, who was one of the main influences on Mark Andreessen's techno-optimist manifesto. Because they're not libertarian. I mean, it's bonkers to me that people, I mean, I guess they self-define as that, but I think it's in the same, I mean, it's a wolf in sheep's clothing for them to self-define like that. And I think people haven't really looked very closely at what these people want, because, you know, in the case of someone like Yarvin, who's very close with Peter Thiel, and has influenced tremendously his political philosophy. I mean, basically, you know, and this is kind of common with how a lot of the stuff we've been talking about recently works. You know, they'll accurately talk about how the system sucks, and people are like, yeah, the system does suck, you know? But then they get around to their solutions, and then, you know, when people like agree with your diagnosis of the problem, they'll be like more inclined to get on board with your solutions. So, you know, with Curtis Yarvin, it's basically about turning the U.S. into a corporate monopoly. So it's about deconstructing the existing state and the cathedral and all of that. And then once sufficiently deconstructed, you know, basically completely privatize the state. But in doing so, you're not going to limit or eliminate the authoritarian powers of the state. You will keep them. And then you'll basically have a CEO of that sovereign corporation or whatever, or a gov corp, a government corporation, run everything as a dictator.
Yeah,
I don't think that sounds very liberty maximizing to me. And there's a quote from Yarvin that is very, I mean, honestly, it's something Klaus Schwab could have said. I'll read it to you, Marty, because I wanted to make sure that I had it verbatim right, so no one can be like, he never said that. No, he absolutely did. This is his opinion on what should be done with undesirable elements of society or adults who are not productive members of society. He said, quote, "Our goal, in short, is a humane alternative to genocide. That is, the ideal solution achieves the same result as mass murder, i.e., in parentheses, the removal of undesirable elements from society, in parentheses, but without any of the moral stigma. The best humane alternative to genocide I can think of is not to liquidate the wards," meaning people, "either metaphorically or literally, but to virtualize them. A virtualized human is in permanent solitary confinement, waxed like a bee larva into a cell which is sealed except for emergencies. This would drive him insane, except that the cell contains an immersive virtual reality interface that allows him to experience a rich, fulfilling life in a completely imaginary world." Live in the pod, live in the multiverse.
Yeah.
Who decides if you're undesirable? The corporate monarch on top.
Back in the day, I've met Curtis in person. I actually went to two of the 4-part lecture series of Peter Thiel's Antichrist.
You did?
Series in Austin. Yeah. I got
oh,
invited.
shit. What was it
You
like?
got invited?
Yeah. And by a friend, they did it at UATX. And it was actually interesting. And I think people... Wow. Like the way he thinks the Antichrist is going to be some like 33-year-old and something we should look out for, and the way he framed it.
33-year-old, he said, that ain't interesting.
Yeah, the Antichrist has to be around the same age as Jesus is his thesis, and it was very interesting. I've met Curtis in person too, and I think he's got a very Hoppian view. What you describe as like a corporate monopoly dictatorship, he would describe as like we need to get back to monarchy, which I don't think I agree with. I think we need more I think we need.
But
to
I mean, that's
to,
not libertarian. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like a monarchy isn't libertarian. It isn't liberty maximizing. It does not reduce or remove the authoritarian power of the state. There would still be, under a monarchy, there's still like tariffs and regulations and all of these things that libertarians don't like. I don't see how it's libertarian.
Yeah, no. I mean, I think the argument, I'm not going to speak for him, but I think the gist of what I understand, I'm not saying I completely agree with, like, I don't think it's pragmatic in the sense that it could actually be implemented, but I think his view would be, is that monarchs, if they're actually doing their job right, and they're incentivized to do their job right, because the people will kill them if they don't. And so they're like, I'm just giving the sort of neo-reactionist monarch copy and
yeah, but at the same time, if you do that in today's world, you know, and someone like Peter Thiel has Palantir around, no one gets to kill the monarch when he does a bad job.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. It's not pragmatic for today's day and age. Like, I think we need to get back to like Holy Roman Empire.
You think that?
Levels of distribution. Like if you go back to the Holy Roman Empire and you have like very, very small city states, I think that is.
Wasn't it still kind of feudalist though?
It was. I'm talking about from like a state structure wide. Like I'm talking get more distributed, more decentralized. Like here in the United States, 50
but without
states.
the feudalism, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, to me, it's interesting the way that technology plays a role in the like decentralization and then re-centralization and then like the state is always kind of fluctuating like that. And like, I mean, it's an analogy that's been made a bunch of times, but like the idea of like the gunpowder revolution being a decentralizing thing at first, you know, because it's like you want to go kill the monarch. Well, now I got a fucking musket and I can go in there and shoot you or whatever. And it like decentralized the monopoly on violence. But then they got really good at making gunpowder and, you know, F-16s and whatever, and, you know, drones and surveillance technology and all these things. And then that, like, monopoly was reinstated by the furthering of that technology. So while it was something that initially decentralized power and did lead to, like, uprisings of, you know, people in the feudal system being able to, you know, get out of it because they could go blam, blam. Good luck reloading your musket fast enough, you know, as one monarch to kill 50 peasants or whatever, like good luck. But then as the technology grew on, it became re-centralizing. And I think we're seeing that with communication tech. And we're seeing that with, you know, financial tech. Because initially all of these things did distribute power. Like the internet in the 90s was fucking awesome. The internet in the early 2000s was fucking amazing. It was cool. There was tons of crazy shit happening. It was really creative. There was like, you know, I was like a big gamer in that time and like playing Counter-Strike and user map settings and mods and fucking StarCraft and, you know, downloading ROMs and things.
Zerg Rush.
Yeah, exactly. Like there was vernacular being made. There was connections being made. There was a really cool thing. And I think I said this actually on the show before, but it's like we built the internet. It was the people. It was yes, it was a DARPA project. But then it spread out and it, you know, all the communication early on the internet, the cool content was like made by us. It was made by like cool people online. And that was very cool. And now we're seeing it like re-centralize. And now it's like the internet to like 6 billion people in the world, like is Facebook. And like, that's not the fucking internet. Like that sucks.
Going back to AOL.
Yeah, exactly. Like we've gone back to the AOL homepage, but without the like, disturbing chat rooms and interesting shit going on. You know, now it's just like the most like sanitized, you know, corpo approved content. And now we're seeing, communication tech has kind of re-centralized. And I think kind of unfortunately, like, I don't know how it's all going to play out, but I think we're kind of seeing that with financial tech too, where like a lot of the stuff that was going on at the beginning of the sort of digital financial revolution, like was pretty revolutionary. And like it was amazing that you could generate coins meaningfully with like a CPU and be able to, you know, transact, you know, with like very little bandwidth, very little storage space, and very little processing power, and being able to have like a Swiss bank on your, you know, Dell or whatever. Now it's like kind of re-centralizing, and a lot of the peer-to-peer stuff that was, you know, so cool about the promise of the early revolution is like everyone's just going to trusted custodians. Like, I'm not saying everybody. I'm not a doomer about it. I think there are people doing cool stuff. But my fear is that we've seen a cycle of technology dissolving power and then re-centralizing it to an even smaller, the U.S. empire is the biggest monopoly of violence in the world. Yes, the gunpowder revolution decentralized power from feudal lords to the peasants, but now it's re-centralized to, F-16s, B-52s, B-2s, whatever. No one's fucking with that. Now we have drone tech and all this stuff. It's going to just even further centralize where good luck, when we have AI drones going around taking out, people before they do something bad because they've profiled them successfully. Like, good luck fighting back against that power. We've seen this time and time again, this, devolving decentralization, re-centralization. And I think we're seeing it with communication tech. I think we're already kind of there. The internet is way less free than it used to be. And I'm fearful of that happening with financial tech, because I think the way you dictate human behavior is with financial incentives. Like, that's how you do it. And so if they want to really dictate human behavior, they've got the content stuff kind of down. They're doing pretty good with that. But now you affect monetization, you affect their bank accounts, you affect income streams, you inflate the fuck out of the dollar, which is obviously happening and about to happen. You get everybody on the globe onboarded onto the dollar with stablecoins. Then you inflate the fuck out of the dollar. And then it's like, okay, well, you have your wallet and we'll send you $2,000 a month if you conform and do all these things. And they can really centralize monetary policy. Like, it's ironic, like the end result of cryptocurrency might literally be the U.S. Treasury runs the entire financial system.
Yeah, well, that's how you get your new world currency.
We're not going to let it happen.
Yeah. I mean, we can't. Because there's no coming back from it.
What's up, freaks? This rip is brought to you by good friends at Silent. Silent creates everyday Faraday gear that protects your hardware. We're in Bitcoin. We have a lot of hardware that we need to secure. Your wallet emits signals that can leave you vulnerable. You want to pick up Silent's gear, put your hardware in that. I have a tap signer right here. I got the Silent card holder, replaced my wallet. I was using Ridge Wallet because it's secured against RFID signal jacking. Silent, the card holder, does the same thing. It's much sleeker, fits in my pocket much easier. I also have the Faraday phone sleeve, which you can put a hardware wallet in. We're actually using it for our keys at the house too. There's been a lot of robberies. They have essential Faraday slings, Faraday backpacks. It's a Bitcoin company. They're running on a Bitcoin standard. They have a Bitcoin treasury. They accept Bitcoin via Strike. So go to slnt.com/TFTC to get 15% off anything, or simply just use the code TFTC when shopping at slnt.com. Patented technology, special operations approved. It has free shipping as well, so go check it out. Sup, freaks? Bitcoin has crossed the Rubicon. This extended consolidation in Bitcoin has led some to think the bull run is exhausted. But what if the on-chain evidence tells another story? On September 30th, James Check will break down how ETF flows and institutional allocation are reshaping the cycle and setting higher floors. He'll show why extended periods of chopsolidation are just time pain as heavy distributions of coins are absorbed by the market. Bitcoin has crossed the Rubicon into being a true institutional grade asset. This session is designed to help you understand what that means for this bull run and beyond. Register now for early access to a new on-chain metrics report from Check On-Chain at unchained.com/TFTC. We got to tie this back to the expansion of the Patriot Act, because I don't think we touched on that enough. And that was like with the with David Sachs and Bo Hines before he left for Tether. Right. Like, they obviously had that 180-day period where we need a brief on the state of the crypto landscape and what we're going to do from a policy perspective. And they snuck that blurb, I believe, on like page 167 of a 300-page report. There was like 2 sections where we recommend that you expand the Patriot Act to include a 6th condition, I think is how they call it. I think there's 5 conditions that the Patriot Act sort of looks for when it pertains to financial information. They're like, we need to expand, create a 6th condition for digital assets. And I mean, it's just completely tone deaf from the administration, where it's like, no, we're a bunch of people who would like to repeal the Patriot Act, repeal the Bank Secrecy Act. And then you had comments on the Hill, I believe 2 or 3 weeks ago, from FinCEN and the Treasury talking about what they want to do to sort of codify this 6th condition. And they talked about eliminating the ability for individuals to coin join, eliminating the ability for individuals to do sort of delayed transaction broadcasting, which is a good tried and true sort of best practice for broadcasting on-chain Bitcoin transactions. And the one asinine thing that really is like a signal, like, holy crap, they're trying to really screw this up for people, is like, you can't have single use addresses, which is best practice. You don't want to be sending Bitcoin to the same address. And they were like, we don't like the practice of people creating single use addresses when they're receiving Bitcoin. That tells us that they're doing something nefarious, when that is literally best practice, what people have been recommended to do since XPubs became a thing over 10 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, see, I mean, this is why it's important with the talking about the war on domestic terror, war of terror stuff, because a lot of this is justified a lot of the stuff that's been, or rhetoric that's been used to justify targeting, improved privacy on transactions has been, it could be used to finance terrorism, or it could be money laundering. But you know who's the biggest financer of terrorism and the biggest money launderer in the world? Well, it's probably the U.S. government and its allied governments in their national security states that have documented. I mean, there's so much evidence of them doing that for a very, very long time through a variety of banks. And, in the digital era, they're probably using entities like that for those same purposes as well. I would be shocked if they were not. This is about censoring or preventing regular people from having privacy. Just like how I said earlier, Bill Barr being like, we want access to everyone's encrypted stuff. We don't want encryption to really exist. At least as it relates to the federal government. Maybe there's encryption between, me and Mark and me and you, Marty, right? But like the government would have a backdoor into whatever it wants. And that's what they want for financial transactions, too. And also, you have to keep in mind, data is the new oil. They want to harvest as much data from us as possible. If, financial transactions are walled off and they can't take that data, they don't like that. And it's an important part of them being able to profile you. I mean, a lot of the stuff that's in your NSA file or whatever, and what they've sucked up through all the warrantless spying for decades now, a lot of it is financial transactional stuff. And I don't think they have any interest in having that change. But now as we see this, apparent effort to sort of regen up war on domestic terror rhetoric, we need this to stop Antifa and the dark money going into these radical left organizations, this and that. I mean, be careful there, because they may be pushing for the same stuff and say it's to stop all these groups, but ultimately it is less financial freedom for everyone.
Yeah.
Right.
And even if you do subscribe to the two-party system, like in earnest, it's like, let's not set precedent to go after leftist groups really hard. And then, it's fucking Gavin Newsom running this shit. And he comes in and starts going after all these right groups. Like, even if you do subscribe to that, it's a very dangerous, because, I mean, they'll change perception and pivot whenever it's convenient for them. And they'll use it to enact really disgusting, dangerous, even acts of war. Like, what are they doing in Venezuela right now? It's like, they're like, oh my God, all the drugs are pouring in from Venezuela. Let's go bomb these people. It's like as if the U.S. government hasn't been bringing in drugs and trafficking drugs in the United States and financing their like black book operations. Like, oh, now we got to go blow up a fishing boat in Venezuela and start like an act of war and have like, it's just absurd. I guess maybe they figured out another way to finance black book operations using cryptocurrency, but maybe they don't need the drug trade
they're keeping
anymore.
the Ukraine war going, so that's
right.
all,
Right, sure, but it's like they will take something that they'll entrench and they'll use to to make a law or to do a thing, a decade ago, and then in the future they'll use the exact opposite of that thing to enforce whatever the hell they want. So it's like we have enough evidence now of this ping pong back and forth. These ping pongs used to be generational, where we would see, parties literally just switch entirely. The Dems and the Republicans basically switched, in the Kennedy era, like, and before, what side they were really on in terms of kind of traditional left, right. That switched. That used to be a generational thing. You wouldn't see that in your lifetime. Our fucking generation is getting onslaughted with just back and forth. We're in this, like we kind of said, last time we were on, we're entering this fucking, a cyclone, and the hypernormalization of everything is going to be super destabilizing and discombobulating on purpose. And they're going to use it to push a whole bunch of shit, and it's going to be really crazy. It's been even crazier than I possibly thought it could be with like how fast things are going back and forth and moving. And just
I mean, just this administration alone, I mean, does it feel like it's been 9 months? I mean, I feel like it's been like 2 years.
Oh my God, yeah.
Yeah, and it's like, I wrote a newsletter like the week after Charlie Kirk, like, don't focus on the negative, focus on the good coming out of that. And I think when it comes to all this discussion, like particularly the war on domestic terror, like the signal to me that we're going in the right direction is when you're actually tackling the core of the problem, which I think is people are doped up on SSRIs that are driving them crazy. The food's bad, their health's bad. And we're not actually getting to the other core of the problem, the predominant core of the problem, which is the economic situation. Like people are all pissed off because they can't sustain a quality of life that their parents and grandparents were able to, and that's going to drive people to the streets, and they're going to have sort of misdirected ire.
But they don't want another like Occupy Wall Street thing when people realize that they're still getting screwed by bankers, right?
And that's what we need to anchor people to focus on the core problems. Like it's economic, quality of life, wealth gap.
Totally.
Yeah, and I would add that our government is run by organized crime, who are also the bankers, basically, and they don't want freedom for the plebs.
Yeah, it's like let's hyper focus on like
how do we get the plebs to give their freedoms away to us, and we'll tell them that they're getting all of these things. Better security, no crime. Yeah,
and also like
etc.
Who like people have really bad quality of life for all the reasons why you just said. I would say I agree. It's a bit of a cop out sometimes, but I kind of think it's true. It's like, well, the dollar has just inflated so much. No one can save any money. Wages suck. Everything's more expensive. Everyone is like, it's just the pot is boiling. And really, instead of blaming the people that caused the situation in the first place, right? Like this was an issue I had, I hate both parties, but this was an issue I had with some of the people that were giving a free pass to Trump for 2.0. It's like he printed a ton of money and locked everybody down, but like he was a big part of the bailouts the first time around, the going direct plan, which you could argue maybe was even the point of the pandemic, was to print a ton of money when the repo market fails in fall 2019 and then shut everything down. So there's no demand, and we print trillions of dollars and hand it to BlackRock, basically. But like we're all focusing on not the issues, A, and not the cause of the issues, B, and then C, we're focusing on like, oh, it's like armed, mentally ill transsexuals that's why my life sucks. It's like, no, it's not. There's like barely any of them in the world at all. Like I like we're all being really like, because our content feeds are so curated, they can, again, I talked about this last time, they know what demographic we are. They can feed us exactly what it is that we need to see to push us a little bit in that direction. And we misplace the blame. They get us so angry at the totally wrong things. Like, again, I think TDS, Trump Derangement Syndrome, was like the greatest psyop, maybe next to Q, like ever, because the left is so deranged as to how they talk about Trump that you can't even take them seriously. And they don't talk it's like, okay, well, your criticisms of Trump are ridiculous, but there's a lot of things to criticize Trump about, but you can't because then you're a libtard. And it's like, well, no, I don't have anything against I don't blame the liberals for anything that happened. Like they were socially engineered to do absolutely insane shit and believe crazy shit because their quality of life sucked. And I don't blame the right either because they were socially engineered just on a different social media platform or with a different algorithm. And I don't blame them. It's not their fault. It's not the left or the right's fault. It's the people at the top that are giving us all this shit to make us mad at each other. And we need to come together and not go kill each other in the streets and go point at the people that are causing this. And as the discourse falls apart, as our public squares fall apart, and we're forced more and more onto centralized platforms and centralized financial instruments, we like lose the ability to come together and fight the real issue that we need to fight. And even just saying that, right? Like I'm probably now on some fucking Palantir database because I'm saying we should, you know,
they don't surveil U.S. citizens. You're fine.
Good. Perfect. But like, yeah, we should tar and feather the people running the government on both sides that did this to us. I don't want to hurt my brother in the street. You know, it's like, they're my classmates, you know, like they're not, I don't care if they believe crazy things. I think both people on both sides believe crazy things. I probably believe crazy things, but I'm not that they're not my enemy. You know, they're my brother. So why are we shooting each other? What
I brought up Occupy Wall Street earlier, and I think that was really disturbing to them because that was like, this is
bipartisan.
The majority of people. Yes, and it's against the oligarchy, right? The 1% oligarchy. And honestly, you know, a lot of my work points to this being a bipartisan thing, pushing us towards this techno-feudalism, like a neo-feudalism stuff with transhumanism in it, where they use transhumanism and AI to basically stratify the 99% from the 1% by technological and genetic engineering means, basically. And they're very open about that. And one of the guys I brought up earlier, who was an inspiration for Mark Andreessen's techno-optimist stuff, one of the neo-reactionary guys, the Dark Enlightenment guy, his name's Nick Land. He basically says, he calls the elite the self-filtering, or what is it? I wrote it down, sorry. Genetically self-filtering elite, and says that they're superior, and that they'll continue to be superior because, you know, once the singularity is here, you know, we'll be the elites will be able to dominate genetic engineering and will engineer themselves into something completely superior to everyone else. And then basically the rest of us will be trash, you know. Yeah. And this is also in, you know, I mean, a lot of the same rhetoric in like Mark Andreessen world and Nick Land world is really similar to the rhetoric you get from the globalists like Eric Schmidt and Henry Kissinger in their books about it, and how basically we need to become, forget what they called it, something like techno optimists or something, that like we need to become. We need to merge with machines. It's the only way. And you hear this from Elon too. And you know, it makes sense when you look at how people like Eric Schmidt are also on the steering committee of Bilderberg with Peter Thiel and Alex Karp. And we're told these are elites on different sides. Like you had people in last election, like Pete Canones being like, these are our elites. They're on our side. And Barry Weiss being like, yeah, they're the counter elites. Yeah. No, they're not. Dave
Smith calling them the cool billionaires. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't think there's anything cool about this shit. Sorry. Taking us to this endpoint of transhumanism, I mean, it basically creates a massive us versus them thing. And, you know, the way Kissinger and Schmidt put it, they're like, eventually people won't even be able to cognitively comprehend what's being done to them and how they're being engineered by AI and by this other class of people that program and maintains the AI and decides what it does to people. And ultimately, a lot of the rhetoric here about, you know, like Nick Land's hyper racism, it's completely indistinguishable from the eugenics of like the Rockefeller crowd and the global government crowd, which obviously Kissinger and co are parts of, or even some of these old time Fabian socialist guys like H.G. Wells. The idea of like, you know, the lower classes will become a different species from the upper class. I mean, these people were the real eugenicists, you know, back in the early 20th century and 19th century were openly saying this. And, you know, they were behind the League of Nations. A lot of them were intimately involved in the creation of the UN. And it's, this is not good. It's something, it's the elites on both sides. And this idea that there's these two types of, you know, two classes of elites that are fundamentally different. No, at the end of the day, they are playing us against ourselves, and some of them play the role of we're elites on this side and we're elites on the other side to help engineer the divide and conquer necessary to herd us into this cattle pen. That is digital. And eventually, if we allow ourselves to go in there, they have made it very explicit that the not chosen ones basically will be engineered to be inferior genetically, and also with the use of technology like brain chips and all of this transhumanist shit. Oh my God, dude, it's insane. And it's just completely bonkers, and it's not conspiracy anymore. They're very open about it on both sides. But the thing is, people don't read what these people write. They don't read their books. They look at sound bites of them on Joe Rogan's podcast where they're basically like, hey, I'm a normal guy like you. And, Peter Thiel went and did that. And, Mark Andreessen went and did that. Mark Zuckerberg, hey, fellow kids, it's me, Marky. I didn't mean to censor you. I'm one of the cool guys.
Now. Look at my chain.
Yeah, he had YouTube come out yesterday. Google admit.
Yes.
I'm not demonetized anymore, so I don't think we have to worry. I think we have at least 2 weeks where we don't have to worry.
Hell yeah.
But,
well,
that is frustrating because I got demonetized for talking about climate change and COVID vaccines. And
I got demonetized for the COVID vaccine also on Patreon.
Yeah. And it sucks so hard because it's like, this is where, again, where like, even when you push back on this stuff, like you need to have a lot of empathy and sympathy for people that are good, hardworking people who are stuck using platforms that they don't control, that their livelihood is connected to, where they're like they have to play the algo games. They have to do the mouth open thumbnails. They have to do these things. And Richard Greaser told me to mention that to you, by the way.
Yeah, we're gonna make the best thumbnail for this episode.
But it's like they have to play those games, and it's like I think your show's like wonderful. It's one of the few shows in the space that I like actually regularly check out, and because you have open discourse, really all across the board, people that you don't necessarily agree with. Sometimes you have, but you're still at the whim of like, if you want to talk about COVID vaccines, they can fucking pull your money, your livelihood. And, I obviously, a lot of us in the Bitcoin space have some bit more of fuck you status where we can be like, okay, well, I can deal with not having it for a week or whatever, but some people can't. And I had that privilege during COVID where like I was a semester away from finishing a degree in electrical engineering when COVID happened, and they were like, you got to get a thingy. And I was like, I'm not doing that. And I was able to just walk away because I had some money squirreled away in this weird protocol thing. And I was able to just say no. But like a lot of people have a family and they worked really hard to do that, and they wouldn't be able to say no. And that's now happening with like content creation and the livelihood of people online. And it's just like, it's sad and it's scary.
Well, it's ultimately going to go back to that same coercive mechanism that Mark was just describing. It may not be COVID next time. It might be something else. But this is how it's going to operate. And eventually it'll be like, if you don't want to comply with digital ID, then you can't be banked, period. Or it could be, infinite number of things. You can't travel, etc. if you don't play ball. And, it was the vaccine passport crap during COVID, but that's really just a roadmap for where all of this is going. And I think there was a lot of awareness of that a couple years ago, and it seemingly evaporated. Mm-hmm. Which is unfortunate, because if you're aware of where they're trying to take us, you can plan things to not have to comply. So for example, if you're like one of those people Mark mentioned, where like you felt like you had to get the COVID vaccine because you have a family support and you couldn't lose your job. Do you want to be in that same situation again, like 5 to 6 to 10 years later? Or would you want to structure your life so that you don't have to be that dependent on the whims of a government or another, authoritarian entity that's, forcing you to make choices you don't want to make and wrecking your individual sovereignty because of whatever reason? Ideally, we should all have been spending this time being like, they're going to do this crap again. And here's how I'm going to set up my life to be independent so that I don't have to go through this stuff or these lessons I learned about how this tactic affected my life and how I'm going to be free from it next time. I mean, that's really what we should have been doing, but there's been constant distractions, and the more people are sucked in, I guess, to social media and the online world in this, it's not even a 24-hour news cycle. It's like a 2-hour news. I mean, it's just crazy. The less you are doing, probably, I would assume, and so it's really important for people to, I think, remember that and look at how can I structure my life and my family's life to help us be independent and safe from what's coming. Because what happens when, like I mentioned earlier, like a lot of these elites, they have these transhumanist fantasies, not just for them, where they're going to live together, but for the underclass. And what happens when it's like, well, if you want to work and have a job and not just have UBI, whatever, well, you need a brain chip.
It's Demolition Man.
Or but I mean, maybe it sounds weird, but it really shouldn't at this point.
Yeah.
Or maybe it's like you have to, we'll inject this into you next time if you want to keep your job. It could be anything. I mean, I don't know.
I have this issue when talking with like independent media people that have, a lot of reservations about like Bitcoin and digital finance in general, because they just sort of throw garlic and holy water and kind of do the, they're like, this is a Trojan horse for CBDC or whatever, total control. And maybe they read some of our work or looked at the stablecoin mornings or whatever, and were like, oh my God, this is it, blah, blah, and maybe didn't really grok the nuance of the situation. And it's like, actually, like, yes, there might be a divided class entirely that comes downstream of the Bitcoin monetization and the dollar play underneath it with stablecoins. That's very actually likely and is where I'm personally expecting things to go. That's why I want it to go as slow as possible. I want as many people to get onboarded as possible, to have it safely offboarded on exchanges as possible, and all these things that we talk about. But it's like, I can still say bad things could happen from a hyper-Bitcoinization world. The faster it happens, we won't really save that many people if the way that it happens now. How many people can really hold their own coins, yada, yada, yada. But they see these warnings and then they take it and they're like, Bitcoin's terrible. Anybody that says anything about Bitcoin is a Fed scammer, pusher guy, blah, blah, blah. They're a spook, blah, blah. And it's like, no, I'm telling you that you need to learn about this so that maybe you don't become in that lower class, because that's probably where this is going to go. Now, there could be good things that come from removing the monopolization of monetary growth, like to this deflationary system that no one can change monetary policy of. That could be an extremely good thing. Also, there could be like, okay, 100,000 people have access to that meaningfully, and 7.9 billion people don't, and that's bad. But they take all of the good work and research and things about like, hey, maybe some of the people behind these things aren't so good, and look at where this could go, and then they write off the whole thing. And it's like, no, I don't want you to be a slave. I don't want you to be an underclass because you didn't research this technology. And maybe it does go to zero. I don't know. But there's a good chance that it won't. And it's a good chance the state's going to use it to debt pardon. And in which case, you probably want to grab some. It's the same thing why the precious metals people have been talking about this for years. And they were directionally correct. But I think technology-wise, they were probably wrong. Although we will see. Obviously, gold is on a hell of a run. But I think when that stops, and I think things will pivot back into Bitcoin and maybe some crypto too. But why would you ignore this trend? It's like saying, let's not buy gold before Bretton Woods. It's like, because they're going to create a new world order with gold. Why the fuck wouldn't you want to hold gold in your house if they're going to do that? You're not participating in the building of the new world order by owning Bitcoin, even if they use Bitcoin and stable coins to create. And you're not. It's not the same as buying a stock, like a Palantir stock, where you're like financing the company by buying their equity. It's like, it's a commodity. It's an asset. It's not the same thing. And like, there's a lot of reasons to be apprehensive about a hyper Bitcoinized world. I think that there are. There are also a lot of reasons to be excited about it. But the nuance there is like lost on a lot of people. And I just like, I hate that otherwise well-intentioned smart people can't like see that, hey, maybe this will be bad for a lot of people, but like, I want to protect my family and I want to be set up so that I don't get put in that lower class. Why wouldn't you consider that? Why wouldn't you squirrel away $500 or $1,000 if you can in a hyperinflating, dollar world anyway? It's like, you should really look into it and educate to make the decision for yourself. Because I don't want you to be in the fucking Yarvin fucking honey bee pod virtualized world thing. I don't want anybody to be that. I want to go throw a ball with you outside in the field. I don't want you stuck in the metaverse, So like, consider ways to make sure you don't get fucking stuck on the metaverse. I don't know. Yeah. I don't know what I'm saying, but I hope that makes sense.
No, I have a couple of thoughts. Number one, like, I'm highly skeptical that like ASI is as close as these people are making.
I agree with that.
Like,
but they're going to sell it as that. I mean, they already tried that ex-Google guy that was like, it's sentient. Here it is. And people are like, oh shit, it's happening. And then it was like, oh yeah, I doctored the transcript. It didn't really happen.
It's gonna
they can do that whenever they want. And here's the thing too, is that like in that one of the Kissinger-Schmidt books about AI, they're like either the development of the AI industry leads to one of two outcomes. Either it creates a new world religion, or the underclass revolts against the elites and overthrows them. Which outcome do you think Kissinger and Schmidt want?
Yeah, well,
out of that,
that's what I was going to say. It's going to sound blasphemous.
They want AI pretend
Chinese
Jesus
open source models to an extent. Like obviously they have their own system prompts, but I think that's our best way to fight back against like the open AIs, metas of the world, XAI. If you don't think they're going to bring us down a good direction, like, and seeing what Tony and Mark at Maple AI have been able to build, like using actual end-to-end encryption to make sure that your conversations with the large language models are private and the data stays on the secure enclaves. Like that gives me a lot of hope. And if you are paying attention to like the cutting edge models, these open source models are really catching up. And so it's just making people aware that they exist in the first place and pushing them to leverage them.
Well, even with that, the only thing I would add is that I think it's important for people to not become dependent on any sort of AI algorithm, because there's the whole, I mean, I've talked about this for years. If you don't use it, you lose it kind of thing. If we become dependent on AI for a variety of tasks, one day you wake up and you can't do that task without the AI anymore and you like need to have it. Obviously, better to be, I mean, obviously in the case of like OpenAI and those companies, it's a subscription model. So you lose the ability to do that task. You are stuck paying them infinitely to be able to do the thing that you need to do. Right. But in general, just like at a cognitive level, I feel like, the people of the world are really under like a multi-pronged attack, and a lot of it is a psychological war and like a cognitive war. And so it's really important for people to like still be able to use their brain for things that are important. And a big part of that is, being able to discern for yourself, critical thinking and analysis. I think a lot of things, of course, that aren't really taught in US schools or really schools anywhere. Right. But I mean, they're essential. And the more we outsource our thinking, to AI, it's problematic. And also, just sort of, not preparing yourself to look at the Twitter's, for you algorithm and having all this stuff pushed at you, and absorbing it all without having any sort of discernment about why that may be, I think people need to kind of consider that they're going into a literal, battlefield every time they're getting on these platforms, and to not be so easily. Well, sure, but it's not to be so easily influenced by things. Yeah. And to look at a variety of sources and try and discern things from yourself, and try to avoid all the rage bait, and the stuff to get us really like emotionally upset and angry. Because I've said this before on your show, Marty, the more upset and agitated and emotional people become, the less rationally they think, right? And the more impulsively they do things or say things, right?
And I think specifically,
that's how they want us, though, all the time.
And also how they want us, again, I think as it relates to talking about Schmidt and Google and AI and how they meet. You were telling me the other day about the Google. Schmidt has said Google is a failure in the sense that every time you ask a question and search for something, it should give you one answer.
Just one answer.
Like a perfect search engine, you get exactly what you're looking for. This whole, 10 pages of going through trying to find something and all these links, like that's a failure in the sense that if they were doing their job perfectly, you would ask a question and get the perfect answer.
The right answer, he calls it.
Right?
Yeah.
And who determines what's the right answer? Well, it's Google's AI. It's the algorithm.
Well, that's the goal of AI taking
Exactly.
over search
Right.
for Schmidt and presumably for a lot of these guys.
Right. I mean, Google's easily the most important one. It kind of doesn't really matter.
So now a lot of these search engines, they'll preface with the AI answer and the results will follow, but their goal is to not have the results follow.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
It's just to have that answer there. And I mean, a lot of people are treating AI like it's authoritative, like, Grok, is this real? But AI hallucinates and doesn't actually think. It's trained on patterns of data, and so it returns.
It's a probabilistic outcome, not a deterministic. Is like the
Totally. And ultimately, it's the man behind the curtain shit. Even if they are feeding it off of sound data cache, and it's a fine algorithm. Once they establish the dominance of single input, single output, and everybody is getting their information from these things, they can swap it out. They can come in and be like, oh, well, now we control the present, and we control the past, and we control the future, and we control the answers you get for your questions. We become the front page of the internet. We become your only interaction with the internet. We become your friend. We become your lover. We become whatever the fuck AI is becoming with people. And you don't actually know who is controlling these algorithms, what the algorithms are, how they change, what changes them, what they're feeding off of. And it's almost an impossible thing to nail down, to know exactly what it is that you're interacting with that won't be changed. And your habits, your patterns are being built. You are learning. You are actually the learning model, the large language model that is being conditioned by using these things, and then you just become a condition to go towards that for everything that you ever need, and that is scary. I think in general, and
especially with kids being having kids use it.
I can hear Matt Odell screaming in my ear right now, and I have to bring it up. But this is why something like Nostr exists, right? Because you sign a piece of data, an event with a private key that is associated with you at a particular point in time, and you basically have that. It's not on a blockchain, but you can prove cryptographically this happened at this point in time.
Totally.
Similarly with what the Simple Proof team is doing by anchoring sort of digital record data into the Bitcoin blockchain, into transactions, and basically proving this record existed at this point in time. I mean, to your point, Mark,
open timestamps.
Is what do they call it? The dead internet theory, where you don't know.
Oh, we are there, brother.
Has ever existed.
Dude, it's freaking insane. I have AI impersonator channels that get hundreds of thousands of views per video. They make AI versions of me that don't even look like me, dude. It's terrifying. Or they Photoshop a hand that's way bigger than my hand, in front of my face.
They're coming. What Black Rock? They're on the moon. What's gonna happen?
Well, this is the
and eventually it's how am I gonna prove that it's not?
You need to sign with a private key. You need to start using
I guess.
Yeah.
She's on there.
I know, but I think thinking optimistically, how do we get out of this? And that's why whenever we talk, I'm extremely optimistic because I'm following the front edge of what's happening on Bitcoin and now Nostr. And Nostr specifically, if you look at some of the clients being built on top of it, it's reaching parity with X, Twitch, Substack. And we're getting to the point where you can have a similar experience on Nostr that you're having on the sort of walled garden platform internet with the major social media platforms. That is extremely encouraging. The fact that Bitcoin's intertwined with that, so you can monitor, you can produce content, prove it was you, have it distributed on this distributed protocol that nobody can control, and then you can monetize it directly via Bitcoin. And more people need to be aware of this. They need to be focused on it. And going back to the whole divide, conquer, Hegelian dialectic, again, I got riled up immediately after the Charlie Kirk thing, but almost 2 weeks since, it's very obvious that they're trying to gin up this division. It's don't focus on that, focus on the solutions, Bitcoin, Nostr, open source AI, and educating people about this.
And this is the perfect segue into what we're working on right now, which we haven't even really talked about anywhere yet.
Yeah.
So we can funnily plug it now.
Yeah, but we're hoping to be on the front edge of independent media by going back into physical media a little bit, which is pretty uncommon. in the independent media space, because what better way to know that it's really us and not AI slop than literally hold it in your hand. So we're making a magazine.
Yeah, we're starting a magazine and a publishing house with our good friend Baza, who I worked with on the print magazine at Bitcoin Magazine, and we got a couple books in the canon.
Yeah,
we got
the first
a magazine
book that we're going to be having is called The Technocratic Dark State. It's by Ian Davis, who, of course, Marty. He's the man. And a lot of the stuff that I brought up today, I learned from him about, Curtis Yarvin, Nick Land, and a lot of that philosophy. It's in that book. It's almost done reading it. So far, incredible, as is the case with Ian's work pretty much across the board. It's top notch. So, excited.
What is the magazine going to be called?
Of course, anything could happen, but we are going to be calling it Paper Cut Publishing House, and the magazine will be called The Paper Cut.
Nice. Love that.
Yes. So, slow content for fast times. We literally got cameras, or let's do a video show. Let's go do what everyone is doing. And then we kind of thought about it for a minute, and we were like, no one else does long form stuff. Maybe we should just do long form stuff.
I feel like the only people that really do regular long form journalism. I mean, obviously our output is slower, but it's very rare. Most people do short, punchy things, trying to be as timely as possible. What is everyone talking about? I'm going to talk about that. Well, it's okay, because it needs to happen.
We need it. We need also, people like you. We need the rage. We need it. It's important too.
But we were, that's not what Unlimited Hangout is. And so, did we really want to change and do what everyone else is doing, or is an entity like that needed? So, we're gonna do some old school stuff. I mean, maybe next year we'll do a video show like everyone else. I don't know, but
I think it'd be well received if you did.
It's not a knock on video shows at all, because it's video is extremely important. It's how most people take in information. I just watched this amazing documentary by Elephant Graveyard about the Austin comedy scene. I don't know. Did you see that? You should check it out.
It's really good.
Unbelievable. And I like a lot of those people. And I think the Austin comedy scene is very interesting, but it's so good. Highly recommend checking that out.
What's it talk about the hierarchy? Everybody.
Yeah, basically the Samakura being created by the Kill Tony sphere in the Joe Rogan sphere, and then him in the Tech Bro sphere, and how they have basically co-opted comedy to defang one of the only meaningful ways to cut through kind of state propaganda by normalizing the tech bros. And I don't want to ruin it, but it's incredibly good. That guy is a genius. It was incredibly funny and really well made. Adam Curtis, there's people that make amazing long form and not really good shows. Video content is important, but
we're not video people.
Yeah,
so
I'm balding. I got skin stuff. You don't want me. I got a face for radio, and more so a face for books. So. I got a body for long form journalism. So I should lean into that and do that. And obviously, Whitney's the best of the best in that, and I'm just happy to be here. But I think it's going to be really good, and it will just be a nice companion to everything that's going on online. We need that too, and we also need this stuff, but I don't think anyone's really doing that.
What I mentioned earlier too, there's this effort to use social media and AI to try and dumb us down. So an important way to hedge against that is, how do I keep myself from being dumbed down? So I think it's important for people to read. Even if you don't want to read our books or our magazine, reading physical stuff is good for you. There are literally studies that say this is good. So, I mean, you should... really consider that. And, if it's a mental war, it's a cognitive, or at least part of the battle is cognitive and mental. How do you build yourself up to fight in that war?
Yeah. And obviously we were just extremely lucky to be friends with Baza, who, is just, she did the cover for my book. She's just did all the amazing physical print magazines for Bitcoin Magazine for a few years now. And I would say she's a bona fide genius and really likes doing physical media, knows how to use printers and do the Pantones, and has the perfect skill set, and is such a savage and a genius. And it just made a lot of sense. It's I don't think maybe we would be thinking that if we didn't have someone on our side that could kick so much ass at it and be able to do it, bring her skill set that's like a lost art, quite literally. And it's a perfect, companionship there. So obviously just hats off to her. I want to make sure she gets due, but we haven't done anything yet that much. So no hats off yet, but it's coming. And we're excited to really talk about it here first, more or less. So,
well, I can't wait to subscribe. I'll say that.
Thanks, Marty.
I've been trying to read. No, I've noticed this as well. Getting dumbed down by the algo. Trying to read more long form. So I've been reading more books. I got the Daylight computer. Trying to read books on that on Kindle. And it is. I mean,
it's really important. We have people that are like, well, yeah, I see that you wrote this piece, but can you reduce it to one sentence, please?
when video pod about it.
Or they'll be like, Grok, make me a summary of this article so I don't have to read it. And it's like, well, that's what they want you to do.
Yeah. And sometimes they'll be like, this is too conspiratorial to break down. It's like, why? Why?
But, it's like eventually, okay, what if the AI run by these big tech companies that the owners have a lot of overlap with the national security state, for example, and are arguably fused with them. So what happens? Okay, maybe it's giving you accurate summaries now, but then you get dependent on asking it for everything. And then what happens when they could easily flip a switch and then it's just whatever they want you to believe? And would you know the difference after that point?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, on that, it would be remiss of me too, before we wrap up here, to just talk about the whole Epstein stuff. We've been covering it for 5 years.
Oh, man, yeah.
It's like it's getting swept under the rug.
Now it is. Yeah, now it's very inconvenient. It was very convenient on the campaign trail, wasn't it?
What was in the binders? They had binders. They were showing it.
What was in the binders? That's the question.
It was documents that had already basically come out and had already been publicly available. But they tried to create the impression that it was new But they bungled that hard, and all the 180s, very crazy.
That's my question. Are they worried, to your point about Occupy Wall Street, that really scared them when it comes to the Epstein files, and now with the COVID vaccine, particularly? I think there was a lot of positive momentum towards getting accountability or holding the people who thrust that vaccine on the populace accountable. And who knows, maybe there still will be accountability as in regards to the COVID vaccine. But obviously the Charlie Kirk thing happened a couple of days after the Maha hearings, where all this stuff was being brought up, and the study by Kevin McKernan and Jessica Rose that proved that there's SV40 and DNA fragments in the Pfizer vaccine specifically got basically presented as evidence to Capitol Hill, and then boom, Charlie Kirk happens and it all goes away. I feel like Epstein.
Well, also the Epstein list got wrapped up in that go away thing after the Kirk assassination too. Even though one of the things that he was pushing for also was a release of the documents, right? So
yeah.
But I don't know. Now a lot of people in the administration are being like, the last thing Charlie Kirk told me that he wanted me to do is send the National Guard to Chicago. And the last thing he told me before he died was dismantle the radical left, even though I thought his whole thing was to debate and beat the radical left through debate and discourse. So I think people, again, like we brought up earlier, just kind of taking advantage of the situation, and a lot of things are being swept under the rug, unfortunately. And ultimately what they don't want is us to go back to us versus the oligarchy and working together. And it's all about division, and the more that they can drive that home, they will. And I feel like as the base and the public start to sort of do that coming together, they're throwing some event at us that fragments us back into polarization. So I don't think the Kirk assassination is just going to be, a one and done thing, in the sense that I think, there could be some other event to bring back that strategy of tension-esque feeling, so that they can either sweep things under the rug that are inconvenient, like the Epstein case, because I don't know. It's just so crazy that there was all this momentum for that. And now it's like, it's a Democrat hoax, Marty. I didn't know if you knew that.
It's all very odd.
It's all a distraction from what we really should be doing, which is falling in love and having and getting pregnant and eating as much Tylenol as possible while you're pregnant, and creating a whole generation of autists to
that are
push
really
back
good at Magic the Gathering.
exactly, and push back against this panopticon regime, because what else can we do other than that?
I mean, that was like to your point earlier about people on the extreme left and extreme right being driven to look like crazy people. I was like,
there's plenty of crazy people on both sides, right?
And all the pregnant women just chugging town.
But the social media algorithm makes you think you're like literally surrounded by those people in your own house.
Yeah.
You know?
No.
And if you go out and meet regular people, you'll find you have a lot more in common with them than the pregnant women on TikTok chugging bottles of Tylenol.
Totally.
Yeah.
You know? Or, you know, the other side of the spectrum extreme
those
of
people,
that. Where, you know, the people that after the Kirk assassination were like, Trump, now is the time to seize power and dismantle democracy. You must do it right now.
Thanks, Sam Hyde. Well, those people aren't even real. Like, that isn't necessarily their opinions either. It's like they're also like influencers that are playing to the algos. To
but so are the pregnant people.
Of course.
I mean,
that's what I mean. On
it's an emotional reaction. I'm going to push against this because I'm angry and pissed off, but I don't really know why. And so I'm just going to be a reactionary.
And if I go publish something and then I'll get some likes and I'll feel better or this or maybe monetize it or, I mean, it's, and then you see people doing that and then you're influenced by people doing that. It's like the whole, like people like Photoshop, like, you know, Paris Hilton era, like body dysmorphia or whatever, where it's like they're like already unbelievably thin and then photoshopping them to be even that. And then people are seeing that and being influenced by that. And then they're living like that. And it creates this like it's turtles all the way down of just like manufactured like insanity, you know, and that's not reality. It's hyper reality. And that is what we're like getting fed. We're not getting fed reality. We're getting fed hyper reality.
To bring up the Kissinger-Schmidt thing one last time, Kissinger, who's like one of the most evil globalist turds to like probably ever exist, was like the revolutionary. Well, one of them, you know, there's a whole gaggle of them. But he basically was like, AI is the revolutionary potential of AI is in its use as a tool of perception. And how it can like alter the perception of the masses at scale. And, you know, if you are able to alter a lot of people's perceptions about a particular event, you can change that event, right? So you can also change how people behave. I mean, it's the easiest way to influence human behavior too. So it's not MK Ultra mind control necessarily, but it's a way of of controlling people and controlling human behavior.
Not that we're trying to control human behavior, but we've been using video generation to tell stories that have never been told before.
Yeah, and you've been doing very well with them. I mean,
that's like, again, silver lining. Like you can use these tools to combat this stuff too. Like
but at the same time, like I said earlier, you have to mentally prepare yourself, not just to use them, but consume them. Yeah. And so, you know, people need to be able to distinguish between you know,
you just have
it's important to use all the tools at our right, but it's important to be able to use all the tools at our disposal to fight this war. But we also don't want to fall victim to the stuff that they're trying to entrap us in,
right?
Either. No, so it's a fine line to walk, but you have to be mentally prepared about it.
It's like being like I'm a blue check, you know, shout out Matt, you know, blue check on Twitter fighting the globalists, blah 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 blah. And it's like tweeting 55 times a day, online 24/7, live streaming on Spaces. It's like you're the globalist wet dream, bro. Like, what do you? I don't mean you. I mean just like you know, someone doing that. It's like, well, like yes, there is ground to be gained by being in the. You know, like when Nostr was kind of first kicking off, and you know, I am on there, but not with my real name. But I remember kind of being like, but X is still, or Twitter is still the battleground, and that's kind of where the discourse is still happening.
Yeah, and I think that's starting to shift
now. I think it's like we are sort of unfortunately in the dead internet shit. I mean, it's just bots. It's terrible discourse. You're getting fed crap. I never see my friends' shit anymore.
It's an AI
I have
company.
to look for it.
AI is overtly taking over the algorithm in like a month's time or something. It's gonna get weird.
Yeah.
They're going to be like, look at our anime waifu chatbot that's Grok.
Yeah. That I like. I do like that.
It's like Elon's like, go. We need to have more kids. And it's like, here's this anime chatbot that's going to suck you into the metaverse. It's
Yeah, but at the other side of his mouth, Elon's like, the population is declining, and then he's like, here, have the sex chatbots so you don't reproduce.
Yeah.
Who is doing who do you guys look to right now? It's building out their projects that are being worked on outside of Bitcoin, Nostr. Anything we discuss? Anything we haven't discussed that you think we should be paying attention to?
Well, our publishing company is going to be pretty cool.
So unfortunately, I'll let I guess maybe Mark knows stuff I don't, but basically, I mean, all I really know is like at a personal level, my house is now off grid 100%. Very cool, because where I live, the power companies are up to no good. They are screwing people, just like raising rates 300% with like no justification. People are really freaked out about how they're going to pay their power bills. And I think that's something that's happening in the US too. I think it's just going to, probably be happening at a global scale. And it's important to be as independent as you can off of the system. So, I know other people here that have done that and are doing that. I know people that are, expatting to Chile, where I live, trying to develop an affordable homestead because you can get clean water in a nice sized property for pretty cheap down here, and trying to build a better life for them and their family and build community down here. There's Chileans doing that. There's Chileans and expats doing that together. So I only really know about that on a personal level, and I know obviously of people in the States that are also trying to do those things up there. But obviously, it can take a lot more capital to do it up in the US just because of property prices and things like that and how different it is. But ultimately, I think those are the things that anything that contributes to people being more resilient at the family level and then in the neighborhood level, I've always said for a long time we have to focus as locally as we can to prepare ourselves for what they're going to try and thrust upon us to hurt us into these digital corrals. So how to not be, we should be focusing as much as possible on how to not be hurted, basically. And that necessitates networks of local resilience, right? So, that's basically, what I've been trying to focus on and restarting my garden and all of that kind of stuff. But obviously, that's me focusing on the local, trying to, practice what I preach. But I'm sure there's, a lot of other good stuff going on that I'm just not super plugged into because I'm trying to be less plugged in, I guess, in general. Because I also have, 3 tiny people to take care of and focus a lot of my time on them too, instead of the everything going on.
Yeah. No, and I co-sign that. I was telling you before we hit record, I moved back home to be closer to family, 3 little people to take care of as well. And it's been extremely rewarding. And to your point about online is not the real world. Like I moved back to the Philadelphia area where I was born and raised, and famously in the United States, one of the shit-lib capitals of the country. But
but also I don't know.
My family agrees with my political views.
Sure.
Some people have been psyoped by things that have happened, but I've found that not only my family, but in the neighborhood, people in the area, if you have a conversation and you don't get too aggressive, they're typically open to dialogue.
100%. I grew up in New England, which obviously, Philly and New England have their history, but Northeast, like, there's shit lib stuff or whatever, but I don't know. It's a different kind of shit lib. Like the California shit lib is a little more fucked up than the Northeast shit lib. And I can say from having lived in both places but I think to your point, leaning into family is the way to go. But yeah, like go meet your neighbor, go talk to your neighbor. I mean, that's like, you're going to find you have so much more in common with them. Like, discourse is not what we see on DARPA social networks that are fed by DARPA algorithms that, that's not really discourse. It's simulated discourse. It's hyper reality. Like the touch grass meme is a little overdone, but like go knock on doors, go meet your neighbors. Like, I don't know. They may be crazy. They may be awesome. They may be crazy awesome. They may be all the things. And that's just like, it's trite. It sounds stupid. It sounds so like cliche, but like, those are the people that are going to be around you and near you if shit goes down. and you need to build relationships with them. Like the whole idea of decentralizing and all this shit we talk about, like, what if you need a cup of sugar? You know, like you go to your neighbor. You know, we need to be able to bring back barter and all these things. That doesn't happen from being on Instagram. You know, it happens from going and meeting the people at your farmer's market or this or whatever, and all the things Whitney said too. Getting yourself ready to take care of your neighbors if something gets fucked up. Have chickens, have a garden, have a well, have solar, whatever it is, so that you can help your neighbors when shit goes down. But you have to meet them and know them and be prepared yourself for any of that to happen.
Because like the COVID era was all about getting us locked in our homes and like not talking to other people. And now they want us to just talk to AI about everything and have conversations with AI and not with real people. So like Mark said, building real connections is super important, and what they don't want you to do.
Yeah. No. And get into group chats, not posting on the timeline. Go get discourse going and brewing with the boys and the gals. And that's to me what the social media stuff is from. Like, I've met so many important people in my life just because of Twitter. Like, I'm not going to say that, like, I got my job because of Twitter. A lot of these things, I found my community during COVID because of it, and a lot of other way more important things. But there's also all of the things that we've said in this last 2 hours or whatever is also all true. So, you know, nurture the relationships you can from these things, but don't get caught up in them. Don't let them use you, use them. And I think the best way to do that is like understand it's about connecting with the people. Go see them, go meet them, go talk with them on another platform, go figure out other ways so that if your, you know, group chat gets blown up, you can still talk to them on another thing or whatever, and forge real relationships that aren't reliant on centralized algorithms and centralized platforms. And so you can have resilient relationships at the local and international level.
Yeah. And the last thing I'll say, because I forgot to mention earlier, go watch Hypernormalization. Like this whole Al-Qaeda guy thing at the UN yesterday. It's like the reverse Gaddafi storyline in Hypernormalization.
Totally. But like I said earlier, they repeat the same tactics and crap all the time.
Yeah.
So the more you learn about how they've done this in the past, the more you'll be able to recognize how they're doing the same crap now. Like, they're not creative.
Yeah.
Focus on the Gaddafi storyline and Hypernormalization, and compare it to the Al-Qaeda guy that's going on right now. It's like very similar.
Yeah.
It's bonkers, but it's very disturbing. Oh, man. Well, I probably have to go pick up one of my tiny people from school here in a little bit. But it's been great catching up, Marty. Hopefully we won't have to wait 10.5 months to do it again.
Well, I will wait patiently if it does. Good luck to the both of you with Paper Cut.
Thanks, Marty.
Thanks, brother.
And we'll do it again.
Absolutely.
All right. Peace
Sounds
and love.
good.
Cheers, everybody. Thanks for having us.
Thank you for listening to this episode of TFTC. If you've made it this far, I imagine you got some value out of the episode. If so, please share it far and wide with your friends and family. We're looking to get the word out there. Also, wherever you're listening, whether that's YouTube, Apple, Spotify, make sure you like and subscribe to the show. And if you can leave a rating on the podcasting platforms, that goes a long way. Last but not least, if you want to get these episodes a day early and ad-free, make sure you download the Fountain podcasting app. You can go to fountain.fm to find that. $5 a month, get you every episode a day early, ad-free. Helps the show, gives you incredible value. So please consider subscribing via Fountain as well. Thank you for your time, and until next time. Okay.